Hello everyone, hope you're well. Today we're going to service one of my favorite under the radar watch movements, and that is the Revue calibre 87. It's a Revue Solamaster, that's what it's called anyway, and it belongs to a friend slash customer of mine, and we're going to fix it. There's a little bit of a rattle in the movement. You can see the case here is definitely tried to make this as thin as possible, as the case back goes into the case. It's interesting design, to say the least. So getting the case back off, you can reveal why I like this movement. You can see why it's beautiful. So you have a Peloton automatic movement here. Here's your little rocker arm and your winding wheel. Goes back and forth. That is driven by a cam underneath this bridge here. And it has this beautiful micro regulator here. This adds to the quality of this movement. So this movement is actually in really good condition, but we do have some wear in the rotor. So I believe that's on the rotor bushing. There's a post that comes through from the other side, which attached to this, but we'll look at this as we start taking it apart. So in this case, we can start by loosening the setting lever screw here. Loosening it up. We can drop the movement out. The hands are incredibly close to the dial, which I'm not a big fan of. What would be the best way to get them off? Well, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put this here plastic sheet underneath it, and I'm going to try and remove the hands with the dial. First, I'm going to take the case ring off. Then we're going to loosen the dial screws. Go. So we actually knocked the hands off, and we managed to do that without damaging the dial. You can see where somebody has tried to get these hands off in the past. I've gotten a bit too close, and now because the hands were so far down, I thought this was the best way of getting the hands off. And I did also use this plastic to make sure the tip of the hands wouldn't scratch the top of the dial. It's a very cool patina on this. I really like this dial. Hard watches to find with good dials, but this one seems to be has a very cool patina effect on it. So we'll put the dial to the side and put the hands to the side for now. So here you can see the date ring going around. So this makes this watch even more unusual, is that it's also a date. So you can see the amount of play in the rotor here. That's no good. If anything, I would say that's the only weak point of these movements, is that a lot of them that have been used, they tend to have worn the post that is made out of brass. It would be much better if that was steel. But if you find one which isn't worn, this is a remarkably efficient and good winding mechanism. Right, I'm going to start by removing the date wheel here, because I can't really get it on my movement holder without damaging it. So we're going to go start in this section first. It's not the most advanced date mechanism I have seen, but I think it was kind of added a bit as an afterthought, but it will do the job. The bridge is very nice, but we'll see when we put it back together if it's how snappy it is. I don't think it's going to be too snappy. There you go. Here's your setting mechanism. The barrel arbor has a huge wheel on the bottom here. Well, not wheel, I mean the lower pivot of the barrel arbor is huge compared to what they usually are on watches. I think it's quite impressive. We'll have a look at that the other side later on. Now I'd like to get the auto winder bridge off. Let's have a look. Yeah, so that's secured by 2 screws, one here and one here. So your post is actually embedded in your gear train bridge. Just a little bit of wear on that. And here's your auto winder mechanism. There's your cam. What that cam does is, as this turns around, it moves this lever up and down, which drives this intermediate driving wheel here. Here you have the teeth that are very, very fine on this movement. And the idea is that your little ratchet fingers there will engage and turn this wheel, intermediate winding wheel, and wind the movement.
Now, in order to save a bit of time, I have sped up a bit of the disassembly of the movement. I will have the reassembly pretty much in real time. What you just saw was me taking the auto winding mechanism apart. Here I am showing you the new gear train bridge, which fits nicely to the auto winder of the oscillating weight, so I'm happy to use that. Here I am removing the upper shock jewels. Now removing the balance cock so that you can get to the pallet fork. Now for the gear train bridge. And before I remove the gear train bridge, I remove the little securing spring for the auto winding mechanism. Now the underside of this bridge is a little bit different to the one I'm fitting, but it won't make such a big difference. I'm removing the ratchet wheel, followed by the gear train. It's an interesting short pivot on the sweep second wheel. There's the rest of the wheels. You have a little bridge underneath that holds the outer pinion in place. I'll take that out later. First we're going to remove the intermediate winding wheel. There's a little wigwag. What would you call it? A wigwag lever. Or wigwag arm maybe. That is secured underneath the crown wheel. The crown wheel has a nice polished disc holding it down. Good finish on that. There you can see that little lever, which has the intermediate winding wheel on it. Take that off. And now for the barrel bridge. Pretty thick, fairly thick barrel up with pivots. And now finally the little hour wheel pinion. It's not a wheel, just a hour pinion. It goes through like that, and you have an intermediate wheel there that engages with a gear train. That actually has a ruby in it, quite nicely made. Sits on the post. Oh, I forgot. I need to remove the cannon pinion. There you go. Now for the setting and winding mechanism. Remove the lower shock jewel. Unscrew the setting lever spring. It's quite a complicated one. We'll look closer at that later on. The intermediate winding wheels, setting wheels, sorry, and the yoke. Loosen the setting lever. Setting lever screw. As the setting lever comes up, it's much easier to remove the yoke and the yoke spring. Now I'll put the barrel bridge assembly back onto the movement and put it in the cleaning machine for cleaning.
On this watch, I think the hands and the luminous compound on the hands have just turned completely black. On some watches that might work well with the dial patina and so on, but on this watch it just does not really look very nice. So what we're going to do is dissolve this old radioactive compound and replace it with some new compound which is not radioactive, and it's going to look a bit nicer. And we're going to match that up on the dial. So if you look at the dial here, some of the dots have deteriorated and fallen off. So what I'm going to do is let's have a look at the dial. Most of them come up, so I'm just going to dot on top of these old ones. That will bind the old compound and prevent any loss of print, etc. Minimize the risk. But on the hands, we're going to dissolve that in a bath of acetone. So what I do is I have a jar with some acetone in it. Drop the hands in there. Let that sit for a few minutes. Dissolve the old binding liquids. This prevents me from having to deal with the dust of the radium. So you would have to deal with that if you're scraping it off. I've got to be careful with this liquid afterwards, make sure none of it gets on my skin. I don't want to soak up any radioactive material, and it also prevents scratching the hands, when that can happen if you're scraping it off. So yeah. So here you can see the old luminous compound is completely gone. I'm now going to fit some new compound, which I have colored matched to look a little bit aged. So I've kind of gone with a orangey brown color, which is going to look quite nice on this dial, and hopefully bring this watch up a bit. It's quite a bit of infill needing to be put onto the hands to get that nice. Important to get this nice and thin as well, not too thick, because I suspect we're not going to have too much clearing from the dial later on, so we don't want any lumpy compound touching the dial. I'm going to do the same on the dial, but I'm going to do that under the microscope because I need to get that spot on. And there we go, we have cleaned the movement, and I have fitted the shock jewels, and I have reshaped the hairspring, as you can see earlier, was a bit deformed. Now the balance is moving very nicely and freely, and we can continue putting this movement back together. So what I'm going to do now is remove the balance, or the balance cock, and then I can start putting the gear train back in place. Very unusual layout in this movement. I'm doing something wrong. Right, it's just a pinion that goes in here. There we go. Very unusual layout on the gear train, but that's what makes this movement quite cool. So here we have a center pinion that will drive the cannon pinion later on. That's directly driven from the barrel, goes on an intermediate wheel that then engages with the third wheel here. So slightly unusual layout. So to be honest, I would have what I would have really liked to see in this movement would have been some jewels on the
for the center pinion on the upper and lower parts, and also it'd be really nice if the barrel arbor holes would also be brushed with jewels, but they're not. But the positive thing is that because they're so large, it takes more to wear it down. Anyway. This is definitely a very different movement from very different movement design than what you usually see, and I think they started with a blank sheet of paper while designing this movement. All right, well, that's our basic gear training, and a good idea would be to put in the pinion for the setting lever spring. If I forget that, then I'll have to take it out again. So I'm going to fit the gear train under the microscope to make sure I don't break any pivots. Comes on here. I'm just going to make sure everything's lined up nicely. Now for the barrel bridge. At this point we can fit the ratchet wheel, or the ratchet wheel. Has a special slot the way it fits in. A bit unusual to your traditional square. There you go. Really work quite hard to make this movement thin, I suppose, flat. And good, we have a free moving gear train. That seems to be fine. It's a bit worried because the bridges have a slightly different design.
replacement bridge is for 87.0 and this is at 87.1, so you can see there's a slight difference. And this has a jewel on the underside. This does not. This has a cut off pivot, so the pivot is shorter and it just leans up against here. And here you have a normal pivot hole inside the jewel that the pivot goes into. But luckily the pivot goes into leans up against the jewel, like as it would here. So this bridge actually works fine. You can see that how nicely it moves and there's no wobble in the sweep seconds wheel, so happy with that. I was a bit worried, otherwise we would have a problem. Now I'm going to oil the movement under the microscope, flip it around, and we can start on the winding and setting mechanisms. So some of you might have noticed I've done a mistake, and that is by confusing two parts. It happens. So I have to take I have oiled the movement and was ready to put the setting mechanism back in place, but I've done a mistake. So I got to take the barrel bridge back off. And the more observant of you will know what the mistake is. Oh, that's how we're doing it. And that is, I mistaken this part, which is the oscillating weight post. For sometimes you just have like a push pinion here that releases the setting lever, but this actually has a setting lever screw, which I found in my parts box, which is this one, that goes in here. So there you go. Now it should work. I'm going to get the bridge back on, and then we're going to flip the movement around. I do think it looked a bit funny. Here somebody's tried to release the setting lever with a slightly big screwdriver, and you get the screw around there. Quite typical on a lot of watches. Not something I like to see, but is very common on other watches, so, but fair enough. Now for the setting and winding mechanism. The barrel and barrel bridge is back in place. I'm going to start by fitting the cannon pinion. I might as well oil up the posts that the intermediate setting wheels are going to go on. That was a little rich. I can take a little bit off again. There we go. Again, I missed a point. I'm doing this under the camera. Let's see. There we go. That's where I want it. Next, I'm going to put a bit of blue grease on the contact surface of the winding pinion. That got a bit messy, tidy that up. So. For the sliding pinion, I like to put a little drop of blue grease where it hits the yoke, because that's turning around when you're winding it. And we might as well put a little bit on the post that you're going to put the yoke on later on. We have our stem, winding stem. Put a bit of blue grease on that. We'll slide it in place. like so. And next we can fit our setting lever. Turn that around, get the right size screwdriver and secure it. Nice, now we can fit the yoke. Put a little bit of glue grease on the contact surface with the setting lever. Now we can fit the setting lever spring. So the trick is trying to get this in without it pinging off, because it can really go flying. So kind of keep it covered like so. And that's it in place. Nice. Put a little bit of grease to soak in between the contact point there. Now I'm going to put in the the intermediate setting wheel here, or pinion. Intermediate minute to hour wheel. Let's get the setting lever spring on here. This is a very complicated one. That would be a very difficult piece to reproduce because it's been pressed. So you have different. It's not a flat spring. Luckily, these do not have I've not seen a lot of broken ones, so they are quite robust. So that's fortunate. Some movements you always find them broken, and this is not one of them. But I would not want to reproduce that. That'd be quite tricky. Can put a bit of glue grease on the sliding surface, so that moves without too much friction. Put it up a bit like so. And we can set the time. Let's turn this around and fit the crown wheel, which is over rather unusual construction on this movement. So we have this, let's get this right, this comes in here. Okay, I'll put a little bit of grease on that because it's going to swirl back and forth. Swivel, 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 like so. Comes in here. Engages with this little return spring. Good. This little intermediate wheel that comes in here. I think that's going to be easier to fasten after securing the crown wheel. So the crown wheel can do with a little bit of oil. If you haven't noticed, it's fairly fiddly on this movement compared to certain other brands. It's definitely, they did not want to make this a simple movement. They've put a lot of thought and effort into this. I guess personally I'm a bit of a simpleton. I like things to be reliable and robust rather than super fine and fiddly, but I do also appreciate what the craftsmanship that people put into fine things like this. There we go. Proof is in the pudding. Okay. Turns around, but of course we don't have the final intermediate wheel that will come in here with the that is a part of this wheel here. And, you know, just because I I put this at the upside down, so that's why it's not moving correctly, so I'm going to correct that. place. Nice big pallet fork. So as oil in the movement, I also fit the upper cap jewels for the escape wheel. Look under the microscope, make sure that's lined up. Just going to wind this a little bit so I can put put oil on the escapement quite easily, and I can also fit the see that the balance fits nicely before I put the auto winding mechanism back on. The pallet has oil and it's time to fit the balance. Let's see how we can get that in here. It's essential that the impulse pin hits the balance fork at the right angle. There we go, a ticking movement, that's a great start. Oh, look at that beautiful micro regulator, I can't get enough of it. Very pretty. Now that seems to be ticking very healthily. Definitely got a decent amplitude. Let's put it on the time graph, see what it does. Not too unsurprisingly, we have a bit of a beat error, so I have reshaped his spring. It was bent. Amplitude 250. I think it will improve with a better beat error. So what I'm going to do, because there's no beat error adjustment on the balance bridge, I have to take the balance off and adjust that on the collet. Okay, we've adjusted the beat error and we can see our amplitude is pretty good. I have adjusted the micro regulator. We'll have a look at that later, how that works. So we have a speed of about 8 seconds a day, 264 amplitude. So that dropped a bit. I think it's because it's been wound. It's just settling. That's fine. So that's dial down position. Let's turn this around, see how this dial up position. To 59 amplitude, that's all right. Remember this, once you get the oscillating weight, that's going to up the amplitude a bit as well, because it puts pressure on the movement as it's winding. Plus 4 seconds a day, that's what I care about, that's fairly accurate. Let's do crown down position. And this is where it gets interesting. Amplitude dropping, which is expected. Minus a second, probably be -3, I reckon. Let's see. Oh, it's stabilizing. to 26 amplitudes. Good on the sideway. +1. Is it really good? It's going to keep excellent time. Very happy with that. So in terms of regulating, you have these little holes in this disc that you move to. You can move in each direction. As you can see here, it says a plus and clockwise, and it's minus. No, it's a plus. Yeah, clockwise position, and minus anti-clockwise. So yeah, very neat way of regulating. And the nice thing when you regulate like this, when the spring is engaged with your regulating lever here, that's pretty much all there is. It's most likely going to stay in place even if you have a knock or a shock. That's usually what gets the regulation out of position anyway. So quite unusual to find on watches in later time periods in the 60s, like this one. I believe this is probably an probably around 1964, and by this time, of course, Omega had micro regulation, which is very nice. You have IWC has its pretty much a standard, but definitely a cut above your ordinary movement at the time in terms of finish. It's typical. This disc form regulator, you find it a lot in pocket watches from the 20s and 30s, very high grade pocket watches, and it's carried on to this movement here. It's very cool. That's one of the reasons I really got into Revue. Is one of those, I looked at a movement, said this is different, this is very unusual, this is cool, and as I further discovered that they're very accurate and well-made movements. Really pretty, I wouldn't say luxury grade. You're not in attack territory, but definitely up there with Omega. Maybe slightly below IWC, at least the automatic one. I say the calibre 81 from Revue. We'll have a look at that another time. That's really up there with IWC movements. But this one is, well, it does have its merits as well, as we'll look at the auto winder mechanism and how that's made later. It's very cool. All right, let's get the date mechanism in place. Fairly straightforward job on this, I hope. He said. See here, we have the date driving wheel goes there. We have the intermediate driving wheel here. And we have our wheel there. I don't want to be negative, but I do get the feeling that the date mechanism of this movement was a little bit of an afterthought after they had older engineers fairly busy figuring out the gear train layout. But I do believe it will work okay. So it's not like every date change mechanism in 1958 or whenever this movement came out was super snappy anyway, so because they just wanted the date on there, but I think they could have done it a little bit better maybe, but we'll see. When we set the hands, you can see how the date change works. This really snappy date changes kind of came into fashion in the second half of the 1960s. So yeah, we got the hour wheel that drives the intermediate date wheel and the date wheel here, and it has a bridge that goes on top here. Here we go, and let's see that this works. Looks very promising. I have to say, of all things, this is a very robust and foolproof system, and to be honest, it's not even that, it's not really, it's alright actually. Good stuff. Alright, here we have the jigsaw puzzle, which is the auto winding mechanism. I think we will start by putting this winding ratchet wheel on here. And that is our pinion for it. You need to press that in place. Might as well give that a little bit of lubrication on the side. So it's just to be a press fit. Look, this might have to go into the, I don't know how tight this is, I might have to go into the staking set. Alright, I'm going to put this to the side and let's put the dial enhancer the movement, case it, and we'll put the auto winding mechanism on then. So now it's time to put the hands back on. Because it's a date movement, we want to hit midnight fairly well. Close to it. Okay. So, as we discussed, this minute hand is going to be very close to our hand will be very close to the dial, so I want to keep as much of the clearance as I can. First we're going to hit this at 12 o'clock. It's actually pretty good. Okay, I'm going to set this hand under the microscope height-wise to get the optimal height without touching the dial. Alright, I've ensured that the hour hand does not touch the dial. It's very, very close, as we noticed when we took it off as well. And for the minute hand to line up with the hour hand. Clearance is very tight, hence why I wanted the thin layer of luminous compound on there. Not anything touching or scraping. Sorry about that. Try and get this in focus. It's looking pretty good at 6 o'clock. Close the date change. 2 minutes early. That is fine. That is fine on this watch. I think that is absolutely acceptable. Of course, closer to midnight the better. 2 minutes before. That is fine. So this is what I meant as being a bit sluggish. So we are at 10:30, quarter to 11, so 5 to 11 it starts turning around, and it takes about an hour to engage. So yes, the date change is a little sluggish, but that's fine. This is a fairly, I don't think they had the date in mind when they made this movement. It was more the auto mechanism and the gear train layout and other things they focused on. So. Did have a complaint of the owner. He thought the second hand was a little bit short, so we're going to see if we can get him a longer one. Right, a serious amount of mucking about. I have found a second hand that does fit. Again, the clearances are all very tight on this movement, as you can see. Particularly so tight that I'm touching the second hand. Okay, let's try this again. Take two, yes. Now we have the sweep second hand on where we want it. We have fairly good clearance to the minute hand. I've put a slightly higher tube on there because it's a little bit temperamental by being this close. You can see as it approaches, it's got a fair amount of distance between it. It's still pretty close, but I really don't want this coming back because the second hand is touching the minute hand. So now I'm going to case the movement. Just going to blow off the dust of the dial and inside the case. So what I have done is I've also fitted the case ring. It's not falling in quite. There we go. That's the way I want it. Let's fit the stem. Like so. And there we go. Excellent. It looks like the sweep second is also clearing the crystal, which is important. I've polished the crystal and put it back onto the case. Now we will attempt to put refit the auto winder mechanism back onto the movement. Now we're going to fit the auto winder mechanism back in place. I'll put a droplet of oil on the oscillating weight first. And this should come in here from memory. I know these can be a little bit of a hassle to fit. So, slight disaster. What we've found out is that the 87.0, the 80.87, not 0.1 bridge does not fit because the auto winder mechanism is tiny bit different. So, what I have to do is clean up the old bridge and see what I can do with this rotor post. I'm going to see if I can punch it, making it expand a little bit, giving me just that tiny bit more friction against the oscillating weight, or I'll have to find another one of these bridges. So yeah, what I'm going to do now, I've taken the tension out of the movement. I'm going to change the bridges back, and we'll have to take it from there. Pretty disappointing development, as it means that I can't use the bridges I have on the 87.1 movements, which is most of them. So all right, one step backwards, so 3 steps backwards, and see if we can get a step forward again. I'm just going to take this apart, clean this up, work with the rotor post to see where I can get. So yeah, so now we are back, and I have punched the central post, compressing it just a tiny bit, and hopefully that'll be enough to reduce the slack. I was hoping just to use a new old stock bridge with a rotor post, which I have here. As I mentioned earlier, if we have a look next to it, the first clue will be that this mounting screw is over here, where here it's parallel to the third wheel here, or fourth, I can't remember, but you can see that's where the screw goes, and here it's here. It's the same here, but this is different. So yes, now we got the automatic winding assembly, and see if that goes in place. So one thing to watch out for is that your little tension spring here, it's the inside of your little ball finger on each side. If that's out, these will come out and you cannot access this later, so it's a bit fiddly. So there we have it, the Mito Rotorking with its rotor back in place. So what I've done is I've put the old bridge back in, and I tightened the post in this taking set. I didn't film that, maybe next time. And you know what? It's not scraping along the movement. There's a tiny bit of slack left in it, but hopefully that's not enough to you know, in any other watch that would be absolutely fine. But look at the way this case back is recessed into the case here. But I do believe that's fine now. I've put a new gasket on the outside. There you can see how the Peloton water winder mechanism works. So you have one, it comes down, engages with the teeth, and pushes. It does that on both sides. So a very efficient water winder mechanism. And you can also manually wind a watch. So great. Let's case it up and call it a day. Make sure that engages with the threads evenly. That's it. There you have it, the Revue Solamaster, fully serviced, ready to go back to its owner. No more clunking around in the case, the rotor is moving as it should. Fairly quiet auto winder mechanism, run in good order. This one I love the patina on the dial. I think we did the right thing of stabilizing the compound on the dial and adding new compound onto the hands. It looks much nicer with the longer second hand, which reaches out to the seconds markers. And yeah, I think the owner will be very happy to get this back in working order. And yeah, if you want one, look for one in good condition, because one that's worn out would be a nightmare to work on. In terms of difficulty, I would give this maybe a 7 or 8 out of 10 in terms of an automatic movement. Yeah, until next time, have a good one.